Do you know there's a house outside Akron with a two-lane bowling alley, a recording studio, a movie theater, an aquarium, and a closet with 2 floors? Yes, 2 entire floors for just clothes. And what's even crazier is that the man who built it was just 18 years old, had just escaped a rough childhood, and would eventually become a legendary athlete. A few miles away from this house, that man's family has built a school, a job training complex, and a museum that recreates the tiny apartment where the whole story began. This is the story of how LeBron James and his family spent 2 decades establishing how much influence one family can have on an entire city. And trust me, it's going to blow your mind. Let's get into it. The House of Wonders. Let's begin with the house because, honestly, this establishment is quite unbelievable. The story began in 2003, shortly after the Cleveland Cavaliers selected LeBron James with the first pick in the NBA draft. And the 18-year-old immediately decided to buy property in Bath Township, just outside Akron, for roughly $2.1 million. Most teenagers celebrate their first serious paycheck with a car, some sneakers, and at least one purchase their parents immediately question. But LeBron bought land and started constructing what can only be described as a private indoor municipality. The finished compound grew to roughly 30,000 square feet. It has 6 bedrooms, 8 full bathrooms, 6 half bathrooms, a theater, a recording studio, a barbershop, an aquarium, a sports bar, and a 2-lane bowling alley. The primary closet reportedly rises 2 stories. That is no longer a closet. That is vertical real estate with hangars. And yet the most revealing detail is not the bowling alley or the aquarium. It is that he kept the place. Miami came. Championships came. Los Angeles came. Beverly Hills came. The family accumulated homes worth tens of millions of dollars, but the Ohio compound remained. Current Summit County voter records still list LeBron, Savannah, and their oldest son at the Bath Township residence. In other words, the family may work everywhere, but it never fully checked out of Akron. Now, Ohio does not publish a neat billionaire leaderboard sorted by race, and private family wealth is not audited for the convenience of YouTube titles. But among black families with a publicly estimated fortune and documented Ohio property, the James family is the cleanest verifiable answer. Forbes currently estimates LeBron alone at about $1.4 billion, making him the first active NBA player ever to reach billionaire status. That number is huge. But it is also the least interesting thing about the story, because the money did not begin with oil, a factory, or an inheritance. It began with a boy who often did not know which home he would be sleeping in next. The kid without a permanent address. LeBron was born in Akron in 1984 to Gloria James, who was 16 years old. His childhood was not the polished origin story people write after the trophies arrive. He moved between family members, friends, temporary homes, and for a period, the home of a youth football coach who gave him something he badly needed: stability. That matters, because the James family empire makes far more sense when you realize it was built by someone who remembers what instability feels like in his body. Long before the mansion, LeBron and Gloria lived in Spring Hill Apartments. The name would later become Spring Hill, the media company he built with longtime business partner Maverick Carter. Think about that for a moment. Most billionaires name companies after Greek gods, mountains, or words invented by expensive consultants. LeBron named his after an apartment complex where his mother finally found a little breathing room. The brand itself is a receipt. By high school, the kid from Akron had become a national event. Games at St. Vincent St. Mary had to be moved into larger arenas. Television crews followed him. Sports Illustrated called him the chosen one before he could legally order a drink, which is a very calm and normal amount of pressure to put on a teenager. Then Cleveland drafted him first overall in 2003, and the geography of the story became almost too perfect. The most famous young athlete in America was not sent across the country. He was sent 35 miles north from Akron to Cleveland, with an entire state treating every game like a family reunion with scoreboards. The salary was enormous. The endorsements arrived immediately, and the public assumed the obvious: basketball would make him rich. Basketball did make him rich. It just did not make him a billionaire by itself. That required a different skill, one far less visible than a chase-down block. LeBron had to learn when to stop accepting the check and start asking for part of the company. The most important word was equity. Forbes estimates LeBron has earned more than $500 million in pre-tax NBA salary and more than $1 billion off the court. The distinction matters because his real financial trick was not being the most famous salesman in sports. It was becoming an owner while everyone else was still asking him to pose with the product. Take Beats by Dr. LeBron received a small equity position in the headphone company before Apple acquired it for $3 billion in 2014. The exact payoff has been reported differently over the years, but the larger lesson is wonderfully simple. A commercial ends when the camera stops. Equity keeps talking after you leave the room. Speaking of knowing when equity beats a paycheck, a lot of it comes down to how the brain performs when it matters. That's the idea behind an audio series called The Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the king and the offer he famously refused. Then came one of the better, this sounds reckless until it works, decisions in modern athlete business history. In 2015, LeBron walked away from a McDonald's endorsement arrangement that Forbes estimated could have paid him about $15 million over 4 years. He did it because he had already invested in Blaze Pizza, reportedly paying less than $1 million for roughly 10% of the young chain. Picture that conversation. Someone places a guaranteed 8-figure fast food contract on the table, and LeBron effectively says, "No thanks, I believe in this other pizza." That is either elite foresight or the beginning of a very expensive group chat. In his case, the chain expanded to hundreds of locations, and Forbes later estimated his stake at around $30 million. He also turned an early interest in Liverpool Football Club into a broader position in Fenway Sports Group, giving him exposure to the Boston Red Sox, Liverpool, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and other sports assets. An Akron kid who grew up without one stable bedroom eventually owned tiny pieces of multiple professional teams. That sentence needs a little time to breathe. Then there is Spring Hill, the entertainment company created with Maverick Carter. It combined production, marketing, and athlete-driven media under one roof and sold a significant minority stake in 2021 at a $725 million valuation. The company's name came from the apartments. The valuation came from controlling stories. And that is the spine of the family fortune. Salary created cash, fame created access, and access was repeatedly converted into ownership. LeBron did not invent athlete equity, but he made the strategy impossible to ignore. He understood that a famous person can be paid once for attention or paid for years because the attention helped build the asset. One option buys a nicer watch, the other starts resembling a family office. Still, there is a strange problem with becoming the first person in your family to build a billion-dollar fortune. There is nobody behind you handing over the instruction manual. LeBron has said that he cannot afford to start over because he knows exactly what zero feels like. That may be the least glamorous billionaire philosophy ever, and also one of the most believable. The goal was never simply to look rich. The goal was to make sure the family could never be financially homeless again. Savannah and the family operating system. This is where Savannah James enters the story, and she matters for more than the familiar wife of a superstar description. LeBron and Savannah met as teenagers in Akron. Their first date was at an Outback Steakhouse, which is a beautifully Midwestern beginning for a family now connected to billion-dollar assets. No yacht, no private island, just steak, leftovers, and the quiet possibility that the tall kid from the rival school might become fairly successful. They married in 2013 and have 3 children, Bronny, Bryce, and Juri. While LeBron's career made the family globally famous, Savannah built a deliberately lower-volume public identity. She launched Women of Our Future, a mentorship program pairing Akron high school girls with mentors and academic support, and she created the annual I Prom IS Makeover to help local students prepare for prom. Women of Our Future shortens to WOOF, which is memorable enough to make a teenager smile and serious enough to stay with her long after high school. That combination is very James family. Make the doorway inviting, then put real infrastructure behind it. Savannah's role also helps explain why the family brand rarely feels like a single-man monument. The language is almost always we, family, and home. Even the foundation's philosophy is "we are family," which sounds warm until you realize how operational it has become. Because in Akron, family is not being used as decorative branding. It is the organizing system. The family did not simply fund scholarships and hope children somehow navigated everything between elementary school and graduation. It began stacking services around the same students: education, housing, food, employment, financial guidance, healthcare, and college support. That is not a donation. That is a supply chain for human stability. And yes, that phrase sounds almost too corporate for philanthropy, but look at what the James family actually built. The logic is unmistakable. If a child misses school because the family has no stable home, tutoring alone will not solve it. If a parent cannot find work, a motivational speech will not pay the electric bill. If healthcare is inaccessible, a backpack full of school supplies is not going to perform a medical miracle. So the family kept adding pieces. This is where the story stops being about a basketball player who gives back and turns into something far more unusual: a billionaire family attempting to build an entire support ecosystem in the same city that once supported them. The school was only the first door. The LeBron James Family Foundation began with programs for Akron students and eventually partnered with Akron Public Schools to open the I Promise School in 2018. That distinction matters. It is not a private celebrity academy floating above the public system. It is a public school partnership designed around students facing serious academic and life challenges, with extended support for their families. The foundation now says its broader I Promise program serves more than 1,500 students and their families. Students receive mentoring, programming, and a path toward higher education support. The school became the most visible part of the project, but visibility can be misleading. A school can teach a child during the day and still lose the battle at night if everything outside the classroom is unstable. So the family moved into housing. I Promise Village provides transitional housing. I Promise Housing was designed for longer-term affordable housing. The I Promise Institute at the University of Akron extends support into higher education. Health Quarters was added to bring primary healthcare into the network. Pause there, because celebrity philanthropy usually ends before the sentence gets this complicated. A school, transitional housing, affordable housing, college support, healthcare. The James family did not put one giant crown on a building and call it transformation. It built a sequence. The next problem created the next institution. And there is a deeply personal logic underneath all of it. LeBron's childhood problem was never a lack of potential. It was the number of things that could interrupt that potential before it matured. The family's Akron strategy is essentially an attempt to remove those interruptions one by one. That is why the estate in Bath Township is such a powerful opening image. The mansion proves one family escaped instability. The Akron institutions ask whether thousands of other families can do the same without needing a once-in-a-generation jump shot. But the strangest and most entertaining piece of the whole ecosystem may be House 330, because it is the kind of building that refuses to pick one job. The building that does almost everything. House 330 occupies the former Tangier, a famous Akron entertainment venue. The foundation transformed the roughly 60,000 square foot property into a community destination with dining, retail, entertainment, job training, financial health programming, event spaces, and a museum dedicated to LeBron's life. It is part community center, part hospitality school, part business incubator, and part hometown victory lap. Basically, 4 buildings met at a family reunion and decided to share one address. Inside, visitors can find coffee, restaurants, gathering rooms, training opportunities, and LeBron James' home court, a museum containing memorabilia and recreated spaces from his life. One of those spaces is a reconstruction of the Spring Hill apartment where he lived with Gloria. That detail is almost too perfect. The billionaire built a replica of the small apartment that represented stability during his childhood, then placed it inside a building designed to create stability for other families. You can walk from the room where the dream was formed into spaces where people learn to work, save, serve customers, hold events, and build careers. That is not simply a museum display. That is narrative architecture. And because House 330 is open to the broader public, it also solves a practical problem. Schools and residential programs cannot operate like tourist attractions, no matter how curious people are. House 330 gives Akron a front door into the Foundation's wider work without turning a classroom or a family's temporary home into a sightseeing stop. The building also exposes something the family understands very well. Dignity matters. A job training program does not have to feel like punishment. Financial education does not have to occur under fluorescent lights in a room where every chair appears to have lost an argument. Community services can be delivered in a place that feels polished, social, and alive. That may sound like a design preference, but it is actually part of the psychology. People return to places where they feel welcome. They bring friends. They stay for coffee. They attend another event. The institution stops feeling like emergency assistance and begins feeling like part of ordinary life. That is how a building becomes sticky. And sticky may be the most valuable word in the entire James family strategy. The family wants students and parents to remain connected long enough for support to compound. A one-time gift can create a beautiful photograph. A sticky institution can alter a family's calendar for years. Why Akron still has the family? At this point, a fair question appears. Why keep doing all of this in Akron? LeBron's business world is global. His career carried him to Miami, Los Angeles, and by now, nearly every major arena on the planet. His investments sit inside entertainment, food, fitness, and professional sports. He could have turned his hometown into a nostalgic logo, mentioned it in speeches, and visited when somebody unveiled a mural. Instead, the family kept buying, building, and partnering around the same few Akron neighborhoods. The simple answer is emotional loyalty. The more interesting answer is that Akron gives the family something money cannot purchase elsewhere: context. In Los Angeles, LeBron is one extremely wealthy person among many. In Akron, the family understands the schools, the streets, the local institutions, and the particular forms of instability because they lived them. They are not guessing what home means from a consultant's slide deck. The city also gives the projects continuity. Students can move from the I Promise school toward the Institute, housing, and House 330 without leaving the same community network. Parents can interact with several services built around a common philosophy. Local partners can see the full system instead of a collection of unrelated charitable checks. And from a storytelling perspective, Akron is irreplaceable. The empire loops back on itself. The child without a permanent address builds a permanent estate outside the city. The teenager, whose games outgrew high school gyms, builds a public institution larger than many private clubs. The family that once needed other households to open their doors adopts "We Are Family" as an operating principle and begins opening doors at scale. You could move the project somewhere richer, but the story would lose its voltage. Akron is not merely where LeBron came from, it is the asset that makes every other asset mean more. Succession without a normal playbook. Then comes the question every wealthy family eventually faces. What happens next? Traditional dynasties usually have a clear answer. The child joins the factory, learns the product, sits on the board, and one day inherits the chair. The James family does not have that kind of empire. There is no single smokestack or chain of stores waiting for the oldest child. Instead, the assets are spread across media, sports, food, investments, real estate, and philanthropy. Succession here will be less like receiving one company and more like inheriting a network, a name, and an expectation. Bronny became an NBA player, creating the first father-son pairing to share an NBA court. Bryce moved into high-level college basketball. Zuri has developed her own personality and athletic interests in volleyball. None of that proves they will run Spring Hill, manage investments, or lead the foundation, and pretending otherwise would be fan fiction wearing a necktie. But the family is already transferring something more important than job titles: familiarity with ownership. The children have grown up around athletes who are also investors, community projects that behave like institutions, and a family name that is expected to do more than attract attention. They have watched their parents turn fame into equity, and equity into local infrastructure. That changes the baseline. LeBron had to learn that an endorsement could become a stake. His children begin life knowing stakes exist. LeBron had to build the first stable fortune in the family. The next generation begins with the responsibility of not wasting it. And Savannah's presence matters here again. The family's public story is not only competitive achievement. It includes mentorship, education, and the unglamorous work of keeping a household coherent while the world treats one member like a traveling corporation. The next chapter may involve sports ownership. LeBron has repeatedly said he wants to own an NBA team, and his position in Fenway Sports Group already gives him experience as a minority owner across several franchises. If that happens, the James family could move from producing players to controlling the organizations that employ them. That would be a spectacular final form. The kid drafted by Cleveland eventually sitting on the other side of the table, not waiting for a contract but approving one. Still, even that would not be the most important succession test. The real test is whether the Akron institutions can outlive the celebrity energy that created them. Can the school, housing, health services, and House 330 keep functioning when LeBron is no longer scoring, appearing at openings, or dominating the news cycle? Can the family turn personal magnetism into permanent machinery? That is the difference between a famous person's project and a dynasty. A project needs the founder in the room. A dynasty leaves instructions strong enough for the room to keep working without him. The real Ohio Empire. So, is the James family the richest black family in Ohio? There is no official statewide ranking that can settle every private fortune, but the publicly verifiable case is remarkably strong. A Forbes estimated $1.4 billion fortune, a long-held Ohio estate, more than $500 million in career salary, over $1 billion in off-court earnings before taxes, and ownership interests stretching through media, restaurants, and major professional sports. But wealth is only the entry ticket to this story. The family's real Ohio empire is stranger, more personal, and far more difficult to copy. It is not a skyline of office towers. It is a chain of places designed to catch people at different moments of life. A school when a child is struggling, housing when a family is unstable, an institute when college begins, a health center when care is needed, and House 330 when somebody needs work, training, advice, or simply a room that feels welcoming. The mansion has the bowling alley, and yes, that is delightful. If you have billionaire money and do not install at least one feature that makes visitors say, "Be serious, what are we even doing?" But the mansion is private success. The Akron network is public memory. One proves LeBron James became rich. The other explains why the James family may remain powerful long after the last game, endorsement, and highlight reel. Because the richest family in a place is not always the one with the biggest house. Sometimes it is the family that has quietly inserted itself into the future of thousands of other households. And in Akron, the James name now appears everywhere a family might need a second chance. So what stands out most to you from this wild story? Was it the 18-year-old boy building a 30,000 square foot Ohio compound, the athlete who kept trading endorsement checks for ownership, or the family that turned one hometown promise into a school, housing, healthcare, job training, and an entire community hub? Drop your take in the comments, and if this story changed the way you think about what a family empire can look like, hit the like button and subscribe to Black Status, because we keep dropping stories like this every day. Catch you in the next one.